You reap what you sow. You disseminate hate, it will come back and bite you. And in my opinion, Charlie Kirk did just that.
What did Charlie say that you feel is hateful?
There have been many of them, but to give you just, a few here and there. Are there white supremacists in the Baltimore City Police Department? Oh yeah, it's full of them. He's right. Okay, I think I showed a police officer's uniform in the movie from the Baltimore City Police. The Grand Dragon was a Baltimore City cop, not undercover, a bona fide Klansman on the Baltimore City Police Force. The government was in the business of giving black women hysterectomies that they did not need during childbirth. They would tell, hey, I can either save the child or save you, the mother, one or the other, unless you have a hysterectomy. Then I can save you both.
And that was 1950s or
exactly.
Yeah.
No, back in the 1950s. And my mother was a victim of that. Which
really?
Is why,
oh my
yes,
God.
Which is why I'm an only child.
Oh, wow. Hey, everybody, it's Michael Shermer. It's time for another episode of The Michael Shermer Show. If you want to subscribe, go to the Skeptic Society, Skeptic Magazine webpage, skeptic.com/subscribe. Yeah, it's that easy. My guest today is Daryl Davis. Okay, here is his book, The Klan Whisperer. You will know him from many, many media interviews. And if not, he earned his Bachelor of Music degree from Howard University and an Honorary Doctorate in Humane Letters from Post University. When not performing with his own Daryl Davis band, he has played with Muddy Waters' legendary blues band, Chuck Berry, Elvis Presley's Jordanaires, and many others, including President Bill Clinton. That's when he was playing the saxophone, right?
Oh yeah,
in those days with the dark Ray-Ban sunglasses. So cool. Daryl's received numerous awards for his music and humanitarian work, but that's not why he's here to talk to us today. In addition to being a musician and a lecturer and a writer, he's also an actor of the stage, and he's the author of his previous book was Klan-Destine Relationships, his highly regarded first book, as well as the subject of multi-award-winning documentary on his race reconciliation work, Accidental Courtesy, which I watched yesterday. In addition to reading the book, here it is, The Klan Whisperer. Daryl, thanks for coming on. You have so many great photos in here in color of all these guys. They have to be in color because of all the colorful hoods that these guys gave you. I mean, just check that out. I mean, this is just so awesome. So, where are you?
I am in Silver Spring, Maryland, about 15 minutes over the Washington, D.C. line.
Oh, nice. Okay. All
and
right.
Where are you? You're in California.
I'm in Santa Barbara, Southern California. Santa Barbara, California. Yeah. So, well, maybe we should start with ripping headlines off the newspapers there. 2 Muslim men just massacred 16 Jews at Bondi Beach in Australia. Why did that happen?
Because people are becoming radicalized. It's irrational, but they are becoming radicalized. The world is changing rapidly. And, the 2 men should not reflect the entire Islam religion any more so than, say, two Ku Klux Klan members should reflect all of white Christianity or something, But it's happening not just in Bondi Beach, but it's happening around the world. There is an uptick in anti-Semitism. And what happens is somebody starts something, and then you have all these copycats who get caught up in it, and it spreads like wildfire.
So is there a certain logic behind it? If you really believe the Jews are up to no good, conspiring to control world events or control the economy or whatever?
No, there's no logic. There's no truth to that. There's no truth to that.
But in the minds of the people who believe it.
Oh, absolutely. Because, they watch the wrong, they get their news from the wrong channels or the wrong people. They surround themselves in an echo chamber. And it keeps getting repeated and repeated, so therefore it becomes the truth, so to speak. One's perception is one's reality. And when they take the time to investigate it themselves, which they obviously don't do, they find out that, hey, whoa, I'm going down the wrong path. This is not true at all. But, the Jews have endured anti-Semitism almost from day one. And it continues and continues. And this is why we need to address this, not just when these tragedies strike, but we need to address it throughout the year, starting in elementary school. Talk about these things. Don't make them history that you put in the history books 50 years after they happen. Let's start addressing this now.
Yeah, absolutely.
During peaceful times.
Yes. Well, you make a good point there, not to generalize. Same thing with the assassination of Charlie Kirk. You hear in conservative media, they shot one of ours. Well, not they. It was this guy, Tyler Robinson. It was a specific person. What was going on in his head? Not they, as if like all progressive trans or whatever he is.
Well, people reap what you sow. You reap what you sow.
What do you mean?
I feel that, I do not condone what happened to Charlie Kirk by any means. I did not agree with Charlie Kirk. I was not a fan of Charlie Kirk. I did not respect what he had to say. His opinions do not, his 31 years of opinions do not outweigh my 67 years of experience. But by no means should he have been murdered for voicing his opinions. And that one person, Tyler Robinson, was responsible for his murder, and we don't know what Tyler Robinson's affiliations were. That has not come out yet. But people always want to jump to some conclusion that it must be the other side. It could have been Charlie Kirk's side. It could have been the other side. It could have been a third or fourth side that we don't know anything about. But we always tend to jump to conclusions because we don't want to blame ourselves. We have created a culture in which it is okay to silence people who do not agree with what we stand for or what we voice. And this needs to stop. We need to cancel culture.
Yes, I certainly agree with that. I guess part of the problem is I think most people are not violent like that. They would not respond to somebody they disagree with through violence, but it's not zero. Some do, so if you have a law of large numbers, you have 340 million Americans, you got 400 million guns, it's almost inevitable. Somebody is just going to snap or whatever happens to them, and we have violence. So I think what you and I and most of us are concerned about is looking for deep root causes. But I can't help but wonder, maybe we can't solve this problem completely because there's always going to be some lone nut that we can't reach.
Right. Well, you asked what did I mean by, you reap what you sow. You disseminate hate, it will come back and bite you. And in my opinion, Charlie Kirk did just that. It came back and bit him, but also so did Tyler Robinson. All right. And now he's going to have to pay the penalty for the hate that he exacted on Charlie Kirk.
What did Charlie say that you feel is hateful? I don't remember the exact quotes.
There have been many of them, but to give you just a few here and there, the remarks that he made about Ketanji Jackson, the Supreme Court Justice, Michelle Obama, black women in general. Also, black pilots that he thought, if he got on an airplane and saw a black pilot, he would be hesitant because that's obviously a DEI hire, and he would wonder if that pilot is qualified to fly. Well, what makes him qualified to make a decision like that? And by the way, I have met Ketanji Jackson. She is quite a sharp person, sharper than he would ever have been in his lifetime. Charlie Kirk disseminated hate, and it came back and bit him. Did he deserve to be shot? No.
Yes, of course, but okay, I don't have the context of his quotes. I have heard conservative media people read the quotes in context and say that's not what he meant. But I know what you mean, Daryl.
We hear that all the time. That's always well, it's not exactly what he meant. Well, then, if he's all that bright, then why didn't he say what he meant so it would not be misinterpreted?
Okay, that's a good point. Right.
So I would have loved to have met him and had a conversation with him, whether it's a conversation or debate. I never had that chance. I did speak. I was brought into Turning Point USA twice, his organization. I was brought in by the headquarters twice in Phoenix, once in 2024 and once in 2022. Very nice people, very respectful people. I had a great time with them, wonderful people. Unfortunately, he was not present on either occasion when I was there, because I would have loved to have met him and had a conversation with him.
So you were welcome there. You felt respected?
I was very well respected and very welcome. Yes, indeed.
Okay. So Turning Point USA, you do not get the sense that it's a white supremacist or racist organization.
I'm not saying that I agree with everything they stand for by any means, but no, I did not get that, get the sense that that they were evil or condescending in any way. No.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. Yeah, you can't help but wonder in the current media landscape where the economic incentive is to be outrageous, if people like Charlie Kirk says certain things in a way, much like Candace Owens or Tucker Carlson. I mean, they just, to me, have just kind of gone off the rails, and I can't help but wonder, do they really believe what they're saying about Jews and blacks and whatever, conspiracy theories and whatnot? Or are they just clickbaiting us? Do you feel it's worse now than, say, when you started this campaign of yours almost half a century ago?
I'll be honest with you, Michael. I know what's going on, and I'm going to tell you what's going on. I learned it from a Nazi, believe it or not. But to answer your first question, is it worse? We are in the best time right now, in the best time of our lives amidst all this division. Mm-hmm. I know people are probably thinking, man, what's wrong with Daryl Davis? Is he crazy or something? I've never seen this place so divided. Well, let me tell you why I say that. Yes, the country is very divided right now. And why I say we're in the best time, because we have been in a state of denial and a state of blind ignorance. If we don't see something, then it doesn't exist. If we don't hear it, it doesn't exist. And I've heard so many people say, racism is over. I mean, we had a black president. There is no more racism. That's blind ignorance. All right. All we have to do is turn a blind eye and we don't hear it. But today, or we don't see it. But today you can't do that. Everywhere you look, it's there. Where there's anti-Semitism, where there's discrimination against women or against another color, racism, etc. It is there in your face. You have to be buried 20 feet underground to miss it. Right? It's so everywhere you look, it's there. So now is the time to address it when you can see it and you can't get away from it. If you're in Santa Barbara and you're going to drive down to let's say Santa Rosa, California, and you get in your car and about 10 miles down the road your car starts making all kinds of noise. You're like, whoa, I don't want to get stranded. I turn around, you go back to your mechanic and ask him to hop in and drive your car with you and see if you can find out what this noise is and fix it. So he gets in the car and you all start driving and the noise is gone. What does he tell you? Well, I can't hear it, therefore I can't fix it. Okay. So obviously, if you can't hear something or you turn a blind eye to it, you can't fix it. But right now is our time to fix this country, all right? Because it's everywhere. We need to address it. Now, to go back to what I was telling you about what is going on here, I learned this in 1982 from the then head of the American Nazi Party. I first met this guy in 1974, all right, when I was age 15, a sophomore, 10th grader in high school. Now, let me just give you a little background. The American Nazi Party was founded by a fellow named George Lincoln Rockwell, who was a big proponent of the ideology of Adolf Hitler. And every time Dr. Martin Luther King would have his marches, Rockwell and his stormtroopers would confront them and this kind of thing. Well, the American Nazi Party was founded about 35 minutes from where I'm sitting right now in Arlington, Virginia, by George Lincoln Rockwell. His right-hand guy was a fellow named Matt Kohl, Koehl. And Rockwell was murdered by one of his own Nazi members, a guy named John Palter. They got into an argument and Palter shot and killed him. Well, when Rockwell passed, Matt Kohl took over the organization. And so in 1974, I was a 10th grader in high school, and we had a class called the POTC, which stood for Problems of the 20th Century. We had a fantastic teacher. He would bring in different speakers to speak to the class about controversial topics like abortion or drugs or, what have you. Well, on this one day in 1974, he brought in the head of the American Nazi Party to our class, Matt Kohl. Wow. Now, you could never do that today because we have so much nonsense called political correctness, which I don't believe in. All right, I'm glad that Matt Cole was able to come to my school and speak. I did not agree with one thing he said, okay, but I'm glad he had the opportunity because he inspired me to get out and do something about people like him. All right. So anyway, he and his right-hand guy, a guy named Martin Kerr, came to my class that day, and Matt Cole looked at me. He's espousing the views of white supremacy, and pointed at me and pointed at another black student in the class and said, "We're going to ship you back to Africa." And then he went like this with his index finger. "And all you Jews out there, you're going back to Israel." And I'm 15 years old. I just sat there looking at the guy like, what on earth is this man talking about? Well, one of my classmates, she piped up and said, "Well, they live here. You know, this is their home. What if they don't want to go?" And Matt Cole said, "Oh, they have no choice. If they do not leave voluntarily, they will be exterminated in the upcoming race war." Now, that was the first time I heard the term race war. And I was very curious about this guy. And later on that day, I was by my locker. I was the only one in the hallway. And Matt Cole and Martin Kerr were leaving. And they paused in front of me. They didn't say anything to me, but they glared at me and sneered at me and started laughing and then went on down the hall, I guess out the door, because they were there all day for other POTC classes. That was 1974. I was in 10th grade. I graduated high school 2 years later in 76, and I graduated college in 1980. In 1982, I went looking for Matt Cole. I found Matt Cole, and I confronted him. And I had a long conversation with Matt Cole. And he told me a lot of lies. He remembered me. He remembered me from 8 years ago at the high school. Yeah. He told me a lot of lies. But one thing he told me was true. And I've been following it ever since 1982. He told me that they were very concerned about 1982 because every year there is a demographic shift that's happening. Mm-hmm. And he told me in 1982 that in the year 2042, if this was not stopped, this demographic shift, that this country would be 50% white, 50% non-white. And between 2045, it's going to flip. And for the first time in the history of the United States, whites will become the minority. And I've been following that, and he's right. You know, our U.S. Census is taken every decade. The last one was taken in 2020. The next one will be in 2030. Now, like I said, I'm 67 years old. When I was a kid, the black population here in the United States was 12%. Native Americans, 1%. Latino, Hispanic Americans, 2%. Asian Pacific Islanders, 3%. Whites were like around 86, 87%. Today, blacks remain at 12%, 12.9, so they say 13%. Native Americans remain at 1%. Asian Pacific Islanders are almost at 6%, and Latino Hispanic Americans have more than quadrupled, 17-point-something%. So if you take just 12% black and 17% Hispanic, Latino, that right there by itself is 29% non-white. This is happening, and Matt Cole was right. And when I first started doing this work about 46 years ago, it'll be 46 years next year, there were only about basically three groups. There was the Ku Klux Klan, neo-Nazis, and white power skinheads. Today, you got a whole plethora of groups: the Vanguard, the National Alliance, the Patriot Front, the Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, the Klan, the Nazis, you know, on and on and on. And they're all saying, come join us, we're going to take back our country. And what Matt Cole told me in 1982, he told me that we could not coexist in this country until people understand that the races cannot mix. Now, I don't agree with him on that, but that was his saying. He said, in order to be a strong race, you have to be a pure race. And you cannot be a pure race if you are miscegenating with other races. He told me that it was in the interest of the Aryan race, which is what he calls, you know, the white race, to also remain pure so they too can be strong. However, he said the Aryan race was committing white genocide through miscegenating with mud races such as mine. So anybody who's non-Aryan is considered a mud race. And so he said it was in my interest to keep the races pure as it was in his. So anyway, fast forward, Now I'm with him in 1982, 8 years later. He's telling me all this stuff. We have a whole plethora of groups now, and they're all saying, come join us, we're going to take back our country. Well, when these people who are afraid of having their identity erased, because these people tell me, Daryl, I don't want my grandkids to be brown. They call it the browning of America, right? And so they run and join these groups to maintain that imbalance of white supremacy, right? And so when these people fail to take the country back, as they proclaim, fast enough, some of these people figure, you know what? They get antsy. If the Klan can't do it or the Nazis can't do it, I'll do it myself. And they walk into a black church and murder 9 black people doing worship. Or the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, murder 11 Jewish people. The Buffalo grocery store, the Sikh Indian temple in Oak Creek, Wisconsin. On and on, the Walmart in El Paso. These people are called lone wolves, and they are trying to initiate what they call Rahowa. Rahowa, Rahowa, are the first 2 letters of 3 words, racial holy war. And that's their term, the white supremacist term for the race war, Rahowa. Mm-hmm. They also call it the Boogaloo, not to be confused with the 1960s, dance music, Boogaloo. Yes. But that's what's going on today. People are seeing this demographic shift. And human beings are not creatures of change. They are creatures of habit. And they're fearful of this.
Okay, back to the kind of the bigger picture there. Let's set those groups aside. That's all real. But polls consistently show, say from Gallup and Pew since the 1950s, say, that people are becoming far more tolerant, liberal. Even conservatives are more socially liberal than liberals were, say, in the 1950s. So the average American, is not joining the Proud Boys or the neo-Nazis. They, like poll questions like, if a black family moved into your neighborhood, would you move out? Well, it used to be more than half said that, yeah, I'd move out. Well, they don't even ask those questions anymore because almost nobody says, yeah, they would move out. But
you know why? You know why? Because, Gabe, the polls give you the data, and that's correct. What you're saying is correct. Okay. Yes, we have become more tolerant, but we need to become more acceptive. We need to become more accepting. Well, if I said, Michael, I tolerate you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure.
Rather than accept you, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So tolerate. Right.
Okay. So yeah, toleration has increased, but we need to also increase acceptance. All right. Now, one of the reasons why, yes, the polls do show that. You're absolutely correct, but one of the reasons why is because back then we had something called white flight. You remember that term? Right? It was all white neighborhood, and many of them had covenants that if you were to move and sell your house, you could not sell it to a black and you could not sell it to a Jew. So you must sell it to a white person. That was written in the covenants. And I saw some of those covenants even in the 1970s. Okay, as late as then. So anyway, today the color of the American landscape has changed so much that anywhere you go, there's already somebody there that doesn't look like you. So now you have to be tolerant because white flight is over. You can't go anywhere else. Every time you go somewhere, there's already somebody there who doesn't look like you. This is why there's a town in Appalachia and another town out in Idaho. They're trying to build these, white compounds for whites only so they can have their own little ethno-state and things like that. That's what's going on.
Yeah, but let me ask you about, say, membership of the KKK, which is your area of specialty here. I mean, it used to be in the 1920s, I don't know, millions of followers, and now how many members do they have today? I mean, it can't be anything remotely like that.
No. At its peak, they peaked at between 4 and 6 million back in the late 1920s, early 30s. Okay, and then it began dwindling. But no, today, they don't give out numbers, and these people are very transient. In terms of Ku Klux Klan specifically, there's probably 10,000 or less nationwide, okay? But in terms of white supremacists, when you combine all the other groups under the umbrella of white supremacy, not just the Klan, but all neo-Nazis and all the other ones that I named earlier, there's a lot more. there are, probably 6 digits.
So what brought the KKK down? Give us a brief history. I mean, how come it's not popular anymore? Maybe we could use that as a model for how to deal with these other groups.
Well, the state that had the most Klan throughout history was Indiana. And there was a Klan leader named D.C. Stevenson. And he made politicians. He made governors of Indiana and other states because he oversaw back then you had the Ku Klux Klan. Today you no longer have the Ku Klux Klan. You have many different Klan groups that have splintered off of the original. So they all are autonomous. But back then you had one like Klan Central. So all Klan groups, abided by this one person, D.C. Stevenson. And he built it up. He appointed governors. He made people vote for this president, that president, etc. But then he committed a murder. He murdered a young journalist named Madge Oberholzer. And D.C. Stevenson got away with a lot of things. But the murder he could not get away with. And that brought him down. People began leaving the Klan, etc. And then, of course, with the advent of integration, it built up again. But it never went back to those original, millions of membership.
Wasn't there something about making fun of people wearing their silly robes, and it became kind of embarrassing to be a member of a group like that?
No, they were never embarrassed by that. And today, they still have the Klan. A lot of them wear robes for their marches or for their ceremonies. Other times, they wear camouflage or they just dress in regular clothing.
When they meet you, what is the psychological mechanism in their brains where they go from hating you or just assuming certain things, and then they see you, and then now there's a picture of you with their arm around you, and you've swapped robes and shirts, and you're best friends. They call you their best friends. Like, what happened there?
Well, meeting me and having conversations causes a cognitive dissonance with them because I don't fit what they have been taught that Black people fit or Jewish people fit or what have you. So that cognitive dissonance happens. Now, let me tell you how I arrive at that. I began traveling around the world at the age of 3 with my parents. My dad was U.S. Foreign Service, U.S. State Department. So I grew up as an American embassy kid. And so I was exposed to people and cultures all over the world. Today, I do the same thing. I'm a professional musician and author and lecturer, so I travel the world again. When you combine my childhood travels with my folks and now my adulthood travels, I've been in a total of 64, 65 countries on 6 continents. I've been exposed to a wide variety of people who may or may not look like me, speak my language, or perhaps they worship as I do, or they don't worship as I do, or don't worship at all. But no matter how far I've gone from our own country, the U.S., whether it's right next door to Canada or next door to Mexico or halfway around the globe, everybody I've met, Michael, I've concluded is a human being. And as such, every human being, regardless of their religion, color, political belief, or what have you, every human being on this planet wants these 5 core values. Everyone wants to be loved. Everyone wants to be respected. We all want to be heard. We want to be treated fairly and truthfully. And we all want the same things for our family as anybody else would want for their family. And if we can learn to apply those 5 core values or any of those 5 values when we are finding ourselves in an adversarial situation or a culture or society in which we're unfamiliar, like me sitting down with a group of KKK members, when you apply those 5 core values, you bring them in, and they begin to see you as a human being, which is contradictory to what they were raised to believe or what they were taught to believe when they joined the group. And it causes a cognitive dissonance. They don't change overnight, but the seed is planted. And every time you come back and meet with them, you nurture that seed. You pour water on it, and it blooms. And then eventually they have to make a decision. Because, when 2 enemies are talking, they're not fighting, they're talking. They may be, getting a little loud and disagreeing, which is fine, but at least they're talking. It's when the conversation ceases that the ground becomes fertile for violence. So you want to keep the conversation going. So when you're this far apart on the ideological spectrum, if you talk with your adversary for 5 minutes, you will find something in common, and that gap closes. You talk for another 5 minutes, you found more in common, and now you're here. Now you're in a cordial relationship with your adversary. And you keep on talking, you found more in common. This is causing a cognitive dissonance. And then they have found more in common with you than they have in contrast. And they realize, the things they have in contrast are the color of your skin, or whether you go to a church, a synagogue, a mosque, or a temple. And they begin questioning, why did I hate that person? Something's not right here. So I always make sure, though, that when I feel comfortable that the person who hated me, I'm not worried about me. I'm not afraid of that. But I want to make sure that this person does not pose a danger to any friends I might introduce him or her to. So once I feel I can trust this person, I introduce them to some of my other black friends, some of my Jewish friends, some of my other white friends who look like them but don't believe as they believe, because I don't want them to think, oh, Daryl's all right for a black guy. It's all those other black people. You don't want that to happen, and that will happen unless you broaden their scope of vision.
So your goal is to get them to generalize to all other black people, not just, well, Daryl's the exception to the rule, the rest of them are bad, something like that.
Because they know bad white people too,
Yes. Well, that happened in Nazi Germany, actually. There's a famous speech that Heinrich Himmler gave in Poznan in Poland that we have on tape, in which he's complaining to all his heads of departments that everybody has their favorite Jew. Oh, well, my Jewish doctor, he's the exception, so we don't want to exterminate him. Or my housekeeper's Jewish, and we like her, but the rest of them have to go. And he's complaining, stop doing that. They're all bad.
Right.
So obviously that's the mechanism. You get to know them. It's like, well, this isn't one of those, because obviously.
How can you hate me when you don't even know me?
Yeah.
It causes a cognitive dissonance.
That's your big question. All right, so just give us some examples here you have from your book. Like you start down this road, it's all going good, but then they say something like, well, but, black people are more prone to crime. How do you keep your cool when you hear that, or how do you respond to something like that?
Okay, so is what he is saying offensive? Yes, it's offensive. Am I offended? Absolutely not. Because his reason for saying that black people are prone to crime is because he cites that this is evidenced by the fact that there are more black people in prison than white people. Yes, that is true. The data shows that. All right. But the data doesn't tell you why they're there. It just gives you the percentages. But, and that's all he needs to reinforce what he already believes. Right. The data shows there are more black people in prison than white people. Yes. But let's find out why. Because there's an imbalance in our judicial system, right, that sends black people to jail for the same crimes white people do, but white people get to go home, or stay in jail for a lesser period of time. There's an imbalance there. Now, another example of that, this Klansman was in my car with me one time, and we're riding around, and I'm driving. He's sitting over here in the passenger seat, and we got on the topic of black people being criminals and things like that. Why do I say I'm not offended by it? Because what he is saying is generalizing, all right? He doesn't know me. He doesn't know my record. I don't have a criminal record, all right? So that doesn't apply to me. Why should I believe and be offended by a lie, all right? So I want to help him. So he tells me, he said that black people were born with a gene that makes them violent. So I'm driving. I'm like, what are you talking about? He says, well, who's doing all the drive-bys and carjackings in Southeast? He was referring to Southeast Washington, D.C., which is predominantly black. There's some white people who live there, but it's predominantly black, and yes, it's very high crime-ridden. So I said, okay, it's black people. I said, but that's what lives there. You're not considering the demographics. Who's doing all the crime up in Bangor, Maine? White people, because that's what lives there. I said, you got to consider the demographics. He goes, no, that has nothing to do with it. Black people have this gene, that they're born with, they can't help it. So How do you argue with that, right? And I said to him, I said, listen, I'm as black as anybody you've ever seen. I have never done a carjacking or a drive-by. How do you explain that? He didn't even think about it. He answered me like that. He said, your gene is latent. It hasn't come out yet.
Oh, my God.
So, he had all the answers, man.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so I'm just, speechless, driving along like, wow. And he's sitting over here all smug, like, you see, you got nothing to say. I had to go to where he was, all right? Because I could give him a stack of books from my floor to my ceiling written by PhDs and neuroscientists that would refute everything he had to say. He wouldn't believe it. I had to go to where he was. So I said, well, all white people have a gene within them that makes them a serial killer. He says, what are you talking about?
Right.
I said, well,
Every one of them.
Yeah, I said,
they're all white guys.
I said, name me 3 black serial killers. He couldn't do it. I said,
Is there even one? I can't even think of one.
I can think of a few, but I gave him one. I said, here's one. I named one for him. I said, I gave you one. Just give me 2. He couldn't do it. I said, Charles Manson, Jeffrey Dahmer, Henry Lee Lucas, John Wayne Gacy, Ted Bundy, David Berkowitz, son of Sam, Albert DeSalvo, the Boston Strangler, on and on and on, right? I said, son, they're all white. You are a serial killer. And he goes, Daryl, I never killed anybody. I said, your gene is latent, hasn't come out yet. He goes, well, that's stupid. I said, well, duh. I said, you're right. That is stupid for me to say that about you. But it's no more stupid for me to say that about you than what you said about me. And he got very, very quiet. But I could tell his wheels were spinning, right? And then he changed the subject.
Okay.
About 4 to 5 months later, he quit the Klan based on that conversation. His robe was the first robe I ever got.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So obviously it takes some time. It must just be they're stewing on it and cogitating and thinking, and maybe they do their own little bit of research.
Right. But
you
then
planted that seed.
When they find out that that black guy was right and the white guy who is their leader was wrong, it definitely causes a cognitive dissonance. And then they got to figure out how to deal with it, because now they're somewhat embarrassed. So now do they come forward and say, I was wrong? Especially if they're a leader. If they're a leader in the Klan, they have recruited people into it. Right? So how do you go to your constituents and say, hey, folks, I was wrong? These people look up to you.
Does that. Yeah.
So they stew on it for a while and try to figure out, how do I do this? So they're at a dilemma. They have to make a choice. Do I continue living a lie because I like the power that I have and misguide these people? Or do I follow the truth?
Here's another one you heard, so you can respond to this too, because also commonly heard. Blacks are born with smaller brains than whites, so black people have less capacity for intelligence. That's why their IQ score is lower than that of whites. We can evidence this with the SAT, Scholastic Aptitude Test scores of black students compared to SAT scores of white students. Blacks always score lower, and you respond. I mean, that's okay.
Again. That is that. Okay, so this Klansman told me, and I've heard it a million times because it gets disseminated to everybody in the Klan, and they repeat it and repeat it, so it becomes their truth. Yes, he told me that that black people are inferior because we're born with a smaller brain than white people. The smaller the brain, the lower the IQ. The larger the brain, the more capacity for intelligence, right? And this came out around a time when this stupid book was written by these quacks. It was called The Bell Curve, and which is just total garbage. But anyway, that became their Bible there for a while, the Klan's Bible. And anyway, so the data does show that black kids, high school kids, generally score lower on the SATs, the Scholastic Aptitude Tests, compared to white kids. All right. Now, the data does show that, and again, that's all the Klansman needs, or the white supremacist needs, to reinforce what they already believe, that we are inferior. Well, the data shows it, so therefore it must be true. Yes, the data does show those results are true, but the data does not tell you why, all right? The reason why is this. Where do most black kids go to school in this country? Most black kids go to school in the inner city. Most white kids go to school in the suburbs. All right. Fact: the inner city schools are not as well funded, not as well qualified as the suburban schools. Black kids who go to school in the suburbs can score just as high, if not higher, than some of those white kids. White kids who go to school in the inner city can score just as low, if not lower, than some of those black kids. It has nothing to do with the color of the student's skin or the size of the student's brain, but it has everything to do with the educational system in which that child is enrolled, which is why your parents did this for you. And if you have kids, you've done it for your kids. When you change neighborhoods, the first thing you talk about with your wife about your kids is, what are the schools like around here? We want to send Michael to a good school. So parents are always looking for better education for their kids. Even if the neighborhood is cheap, the houses are less expensive, but the school system is terrible, they'd rather go to an expensive neighborhood where Michael can get a better education. All right.
Yeah, well, so that's the zip code model of
exactly
education, and then you get a Matthew effect where those who have shall be given. So the housing prices go up in those neighborhoods because there's a demand for it. So there's more tax dollars to fund those public schools. So more people go to those neighborhoods, driving the prices up, more taxes, and so on. So what's the solution to that? One is more government funding for public schools in poor neighborhoods, but the other is school choice, or just give more options where you're not stuck in your zip code.
Okay, so let me give you an example of something. Here where I live in Maryland, I'm from Chicago originally, but I live here in Maryland. The state of Maryland has 23 counties. Right next door to Maryland is the state of Virginia. Virginia has over 100 counties. In 1954, when Brown versus the Board of Education, the U.S. Supreme Court desegregated schools. One of the counties in Virginia, known as Prince Edward County, Virginia, and you should look it up, Prince Edward County, Virginia, refused to desegregate. They refused to integrate. They closed every public school in Prince Edward County. The Prince Edward County government closed every public school in Prince Edward County, not for 5 days, not for 5 weeks, not for 5 months, for 5 years. Can you imagine not going to school for 5 years?
Where did those kids go to school then?
They didn't. They didn't. They missed 5 years of school. And then, a few years later, some wealthy white people got together and funded the building of private white schools for white kids only. All right. But listen, you miss 5 years of school. It doesn't matter if you're in first grade or you're in seventh grade. You've lost 5 years of education. So think about perhaps, your grandkids or your friends' kids who had to go to Zoom school during COVID a couple years ago. Some kids did okay, some not so well. Zoom school was, is not like being in person, right? But at least we had Zoom school. But think about those kids who had 5 years of no school. So when you go down to Prince Edward County today and you speak with adults in Prince Edward County who were around back then, Prince Edward County is a beautiful county, wonderful people, I'm not talking about racist people, just anybody, black, white, or otherwise. Our age, they are basically functionally illiterate because they missed 5 years of school. They struggle with mathematics and reading and writing, etc. Not their fault, but blacks and whites.
But that didn't happen in other counties. How do you explain
No, it happened because Prince Edward County government, the county council, the mayor, etc., were very racist and did not want to integrate. And that's what happened.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that in other states, say, for example, where there is still these educational attainment differences between blacks and whites, what is the cause of that if they, most of them did integrate?
The quality of the school systems in which the kids are enrolled. Now, let's go back to those SAT scores. Guess what? Do you know who scores the highest on the SAT scores in this country? Exactly. Asians. So by Klan methodology, right? Asians must have a huge brain, right? And whites have a little brain, and blacks have an even smaller brain.
Yes.
So,
obviously it's cultural. Okay.
how do
Yeah.
you,
No, I agree.
how do we explain Asians?
Well, it's the home environment. Okay. So this gets to
it's the work ethic.
Yeah.
It's the work ethic and the study ethic.
Yeah. Tiger moms.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Amy
Which is what
Chu is Tiger Mom.
And this is why it's so important that we integrate, because everybody has something that they can offer others. We all can learn from somebody different. We all can teach somebody different. We all have something. And when you put it together and share, that's what builds a strong community.
Yeah. Okay, let's leave aside the eugenicists because they're wrong. But on the cultural differences, so here you get a politicized left-right, liberal, conservative perspective. Liberals want the government to fund more of these poor neighborhood schools to bring those scores up, okay? And they've been doing that, for decades. Conservatives, like Shelby Steele, for example, say, no, that's not. The problem is that, the marriage rate. So many black kids are being raised by single moms. And it's the home environment that's setting the stage for these poor educational outcomes. So we have to change the culture of black families and so on. I mean, what are your thoughts on some of that?
That is a contributing factor, if not the only factor. Yes, many, are there single white mothers too?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Are there deadbeat white dads? Absolutely.
There are.
Yeah, sure. But yes, in general, many black children, too many black children are being raised by single mothers or being raised by their grandparents, or their grandmother. That has been going on since, because what happened, let's go back to the days of slavery, right? Slaves were freed. And then, especially in the South, we had the Great Migration, because even though slaves were freed, the former slave owners refused to hire these people now. These people work for free for me and pick my cotton. Why am I going to pay them money to pick my cotton now? So people, they couldn't get jobs. They couldn't get money down South. Even though they're free, the Great Migration took them north, all right? Many times it was the fathers who went north, leaving the mother and kids behind, and then they would be sending money back. Sometimes it ended up in divorce, or the father met somebody else, or, whatever happened, and the family got left behind, all right? In the 1940s, a lot of people in the South moved to New York, to Chicago for work. And they couldn't afford to take their whole family with them. The dads would go. So you have this abandonment where a lot of white fathers were not doing that. They didn't have to. They could get jobs where they lived. They didn't have to go to a northern state in order to get paid, for doing some kind of work. So you have that. And yes, that was a very big contributing factor, but it's not the only factor.
Mm-hmm. Do you know the work of Thomas Sowell, the black economist, who says his take on this is that the black marriage rate was pretty close to the white marriage rate, and kids raised in complete homes and so on was pretty close to that in the 1950s. So he blames the Great Society, President Johnson's Great Society. And so here's the kind of crude
version. Talking about
version
Andrew Johnson or Lyndon Johnson?
Lyndon Johnson.
Okay.
In the 1960s, not 1860. And that essentially when the government comes in and says, we're going to pay you to stay a single mom, then women are married to the state rather than staying married to the man. This is the kind of standard conservative argument. It's my version's a bit crude, but that's what they're arguing, in that the state needs to get out of the business of keeping people married. They should just be married because it's a good religious value or it's a good family value or something like that. In other words, the conservative argument is that it's cultural and that the government should not be in the business of making those kind of cultural nudges.
True. And the government was in the business of giving black women hysterectomies that they did not need during childbirth. They would tell, hey, I can either save the child or save you, the mother, one or the other, unless you have a hysterectomy. Then I can save you both.
That was 1950s or
exactly.
Yeah.
No, back in the 1950s, and my mother was a victim of that.
Really? Oh my God!
Which is why I'm an only child.
Oh wow! Oh my gosh, Daryl, that's crazy. I hadn't. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, look it up. You'll see.
How
Just
often?
like
Yeah.
just like
Yes.
the Tuskegee experiment. We didn't find out
Well,
about
yes.
that until 40 years later, right?
Yes, of course, yeah. But I guess one argument you hear from more conservative or centrist black scholars today is that was then, this is now, things are much better. Why do we keep blaming the past on this?
The past is a predictor of the present, and what we do in the present predicts what will become of the future. It's all connected. So yes, we must. Well, I mean, it's like why do we have the Holocaust Museum? So
Yeah.
we learn, so we don't
Uh-huh.
do this again. You know, the past is very, very relevant, which is why, if you go for a job interview, or you're going to hire somebody, you want to know their past. You want to see their resume. What have you done?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we must learn the past.
Let me just read you one passage from Shelby Steele.
Mm-hmm.
Liberalism's great sin was to steal responsibility for black problems away from black people, leaving them vulnerable to destructive social forces such as the drug epidemic of the 70s and 80s. It was the suffering of blacks that justified liberalism's demand for power, but this only relegates blacks to permanent victimhood and alienates them from the power to uplift themselves. Okay, Shelby Steele is a noted conservative, so that's a conservative position on that. I don't know. How would you respond to something like that?
That's part. That's just a
Okay.
small part of the whole, the whole ball of wax, so to speak. Yes, originally when slaves were freed and when they were able to vote and whatever, they became Republicans. Back in the day, most black people were Republican. All right.
Yeah.
And why? Because Abraham Lincoln was a Republican. Abraham Lincoln is the man who freed the slaves. All right. So blacks went that way. And then, so it's always thrown in your face. Well, the Democrats are the ones who invented the KKK. Yes, that is true. The Dixiecrats, the Democrats, all right, invented the KKK. So the Republicans at the time, way back in the day, were more liberal than the Democrats, all right? But then things began changing, and it changed dramatically in the 1960s with racists and white supremacists like Barry Goldwater, who voted against the Civil Rights Act and this, that, and the other. Then Republicans began becoming more and more conservative, and blacks jumped ship because the Democrats became more welcoming and embracing and liberal.
At the end of your film, Accidental Courtesy, which I really recommend, it's just a moving documentary. They have you in, it looks like a cafe somewhere in Baltimore with a couple of young black men who were not vibing your message at all.
Right.
They were angry. And their anger is that you're talking to a handful of these kooky nut job white supremacists when we're dealing with they didn't use the word systemic racism, but much deeper problems here in our city. Why aren't you dealing with that? What is going on in their mind? Is it their feeling is like, America is just hopelessly racist, and your little drop in the bucket, you converted 25 robes Klansmen. So what?
Okay. Yeah. So what you're referring to is a Baltimore faction of Black Lives Matter. There were two young guys and an older guy, and they were having nothing of what I was saying. They're totally against me. They were not seeing the big picture. It got very nasty. It almost erupted into physical violence. The movie only shows about 8 minutes of it. It went on for about an hour, but of course we couldn't include the whole hour in there. Now, let me say, about a year after the movie, they reached out to me and said they had been seeing me on interviews, etc. They were understanding what I was doing. They did not agree with everything that I said, but a lot of it they did, and can we work together? So we got together for dinner, and we began working together. All right? The older guy, he started working together, but then he fell off the wagon and reverted back to how you saw him in the movie. What was happening was, they did not see any value in my sitting down with white supremacists. And the young man had said, it's not your job to teach a white supremacist how to treat us. Why are you not uplifting the black community? You're chasing all these robes and hoods. You must have a fetish or something like that. Well, getting people to give up their robes and hoods and that ideology is helping the Black community. They're just not seeing the big picture, okay? It has to be a 360 approach, not just be out in the streets and protest. Now, what you did not see in the movie, because we didn't have time to put everything in there, I asked the guy who accused me of why am I teaching white supremacists when I could be out here uplifting the Black community. He's the same guy who leads these marches in front of the Baltimore City Police Department, protesting, don't shoot, hands up, I'm a man, don't shoot, etc. So I asked him, I said, are there white supremacists in the Baltimore City Police Department? Oh, yeah, it's full of them. He's right, okay? I think I showed a police officer's uniform in the movie from the Baltimore City Police. The Grand Dragon was a Baltimore City cop. Not undercover, a bona fide Klansman on the Baltimore City police force. And there are others. He told me about them, all right? So anyway, this young Black man leads these marches, stands in front of the Baltimore City police station, protesting the Baltimore City police because they're white supremacists, and he doesn't want them shooting unarmed Black men, like Freddie Gray, et cetera, et cetera. Freddie Gray didn't get shot, but he was murdered by the police. So I said to him, I said, well, wait a minute. You're teaching white supremacists in police officers' uniforms how to treat us. What's the difference of me teaching a white supremacist in a robe and hood how to treat us? He didn't know how to answer that. It's the same thing. Different uniform, same white supremacist, Black person teaching a white supremacist. So I know more of a sellout than he is. And that's what I pointed out to him. And I think that is what stuck with them. And then, almost a year later, they called me and said, hey, we understand what you're doing. We don't, necessarily agree with everything, but we think we can work together. So that's the whole thing. There is no one solution that fits racism. It has to be addressed all the way around. Address it with the people who are perpetrating it. Address it with your own, okay? Because we all have to come together. The problem in this country is when we are attacked from the outside, either by foreign enemies or by nature like Hurricane Katrina or something like that. Foreign enemies, our trade tower gets taken down, our Pentagon, etc. We all come together, regardless of our color, our religion, our political affiliation. We stand with arms locked. We are American. We stand strong. We work together for the sake of this country. We forget all our hatred and anti-Semitism and racial animus, etc. We stand together as Americans. But then over time, as things dissipate and go away, we release each other's arms and we go back to hating one another. We need to have that mechanism come together, not just in times of tragedy like Hurricane Katrina or 9/11. We need to have that in place during upheavals.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to practice.
Yeah. Well, I know you got to go, Daryl. I just wanted to ask one last question about anti-racism, Ibram X. Kendi's message, the Black Lives Matter movement. Is that helpful? Has it run its course? What are your thoughts on that?
It can be improved. Everything can be improved. Black Lives Matter. Okay, so let me explain this for your viewers, especially for those who don't know. Black Lives Matter is not an organization. It's not a centralized organization. It is a movement. Therefore, it does not have chapters. It has factions. And each faction has a little leader, right? A lot of these factions do not agree with one another. Some of them are more aggressive. They want to run around town and rip down statues and spray paint BLM all over the place. Other factions want to sit down with the county legislature or city legislature and draw up bills to remove the statues, take down the flag, the Confederate battle flag, or what have you. Rename this building that was named after a slave owner or something. So they go about things a little differently. The problem is the media does not differentiate and does not say the Santa Barbara faction of Black Lives Matter ripped down the statues, or the San Diego faction sat down with the San Diego City Council to draw up legislation. They just say Black Lives Matter, spray painted Black Lives Matter all over the city or whatever else. They just paint it with a broad brush. So it's not one centralized group like the NAACP or the Boy Scouts of America or the Red Cross, which you have one centralized headquarters, one president, policies created at the headquarters and disseminated to all the chapters around the country. So the Red Cross in Harlem, New York, operates the exact same way as the Red Cross in Santa Barbara, California. All right, not so with Black Lives Matter, unfortunately. Now, I think the idea that the founders had, they co-opted it from Martin Luther King. They wanted to put the spotlight on the plight of Black men who, for lack of a better term, were being murdered by white police officers for holding their cell phone, for holding their wallet, where white men in the same situation either went to jail or went home. Black men went to their graves. So Martin Luther King put the plight of Black people riding the buses in Montgomery, Alabama, in the national spotlight. Rosa Parks was not the first Black woman to refuse to give up her seat on the bus. There had been others, all right? But Martin Luther King, but nobody knew about it because it wasn't in the national spotlight. People maybe around Montgomery, Alabama may have known, but not in the national spotlight. So when he put that national spotlight on Rosa Parks, it forced the Montgomery bus lines to change their policy and allow Blacks to ride anywhere they want to in the bus from that boycott. So Black Lives Matter, the founders took that same concept and wanted to put the plight of Black men getting shot by white officers in the national spotlight. But what they did not want to do was centralize, have a central headquarters with one president and trademark the name. Black Lives Matter is not trademarked. You can start your own Black Lives Matter. I can. Anybody can, because they wanted it to be organic. At the time, it was born in the wake of the Trayvon Martin murder in 2013. But, back then they didn't have any way of predicting 7 years later the murder of George Floyd and how big, Black Lives Matter, would come into prominence.
And do you distinguish that from the anti-racism, Ibram X. Kendi, and, his lines about, the only way to fight racism is with reverse racism and so on? Is that a different movement?
That's certainly not my take. My take is to have conversations. Now, reverse racism is as bad as racism.
Yeah.
All right? Any kind of racism is bad. But let me say this, okay? Nothing, the law of physics, Isaac Newton, nothing can be put into reverse unless it has already gone forward. So you cannot have reverse racism without first having racism, right? You had to have racism first before you could reverse it. Okay, so, for every action, there's an equal reaction. It's not always the proper reaction, but that's where reverse racism came in. Now,
yeah, it'd be nice to get to the point where I don't have to think about what your race is at all. Why do I have to care? Yeah.
Listen, my brother, his name is Jeff Scoop, and he was the former leader of the largest neo-Nazi organization in this country, the NSM, National Socialist Movement. He was a member for 27 years. He led it and built it into the biggest neo-Nazi organization in the country for 25 years. Okay, I, myself, and a beautiful lady Muslim filmmaker named Dia Khan helped get him out of that ideology. Today, he works very hard trying to de-radicalize people still in that mindset and prevent young people from going down that rabbit hole. About 6-8 months ago, I was with him, just recently, but about 6-8 months ago, he was giving a lecture somewhere, and two guys from Cameroon were at the lecture. And when it was over, they were talking to him, and they said, we didn't know that we were Black until we came to this country. Right. And Jeff was like, what are you talking about? What do you mean you don't know you're Black? We're just Cameroonian, which goes to your point. You don't want to have to think about somebody's race. You're an American. You're Polish. You're Nigerian. Whatever you are. Who cares about race? Yes, we all would love to get to that point. Well, most of us would love to get to that point.
All right, here it is, The Klan Whisperer. Get it and read it. It's a great read. You know what I thought would be great, Daryl? You should have your own regular TV show like on HBO with a camera crew just following you around. It would be dramatic TV.
Hook me up. Well, I have an organization that I co-founded called the Pro-Human Organization. Because, we spend a lot of time talking about what we're against. Anti-racism, anti-racist, anti-this, anti-Semitism. Let's talk about not what we're against for a change. Let's talk about what we're for, what we're pro.
Yeah.
So my friend Brian Bartoning and myself co-founded, and an attorney named Letitia Kim co-founded a foundation called the Pro-Human Foundation, where we talk about what we're for, and we help others from all different political backgrounds, religions, races, ethnicities, etc., come together. And because we're pro something, we define what we're for, and we work together to get there. And I would encourage everybody to look up prohumanfoundation.org and buy my book, The Klan Whisperer.
All right. Yeah, there it is. I love it. It's such a fun read.
Michael, thank you so much.
Again, all the pictures of you with all these guys, astonishing. All right. Keep up the good work, Daryl.